love that we're starting this with Luffy on my lap.
I mean, who doesn't want a hairy pussy in their lap?
Listen, Hi, I'm Robin, and I almost said I'm Ben and I'm trans, and that's weird. Hi, everybody. I'm Robin, and I'm trans.
Hi, I am Ben, and I'm trans.
And this is Ben and Robin are trans. And today we're going to give each other unlicensed therapy.
Very unlicensed, and this whole podcast is really just unlicensed therapy, if you think about it.
Mm-hmm. It absolutely is. This has been like a huge... We'll get more into like our history with therapists later, but just podcasting for the past couple of months has done more therapy-wise for me when it comes to like trans stuff than actual therapy in a lot of ways. We'll get into that later. So before we get into our therapy business, Benji,
Yes.
Benny, do you have a trans moment of joy?
I mean, I've talked about this before, but I think my trans moment of joy of today is going to be my first ever trans moment, which was my friend Kate, who I love dearly. We were just hanging out at her house, and she asked me if I ever thought about trying new pronouns. And it's the first time in my life that I felt seen, and I didn't even know I needed it. And I did try new pronouns, and it was really amazing. And she's just always been so supportive. After that, she took me to Target, got me my first boxer briefs. My trans moment of joy is my friend Kate.
Yeah, that's so sweet. I love that.
Yeah, she's been my spiritual mom for years now, and she's only a couple months older than me, but she's still mom, and she's literally a mom, so very fitting. But she's always made me feel seen and heard, and she's a professor for a community college, and she'll like send me some of her PowerPoints that are trans inclusive to get feedback, and like with my consent, we'll talk to some of her older coworkers about trans stuff, and mention me as an example. And every time, like, it's just an ongoing forever moment of trans joy when she tells me about like helping people understand. It's all about that active allyship. Yeah, Kate, she is the moment. She's everything.
Yeah, and there's really no replacement for a friend who really sees you.
Yeah. So shout out to Kate for always making sure I feel seen. And she's having a rough month. So hopefully whenever she hears this, she will have a smile because I love her. I love you, Kate. I love you, Mom.
You mentioned her like talking about you in class. One thing that my current therapist mentioned once, this is right before I mentioned the topic of this podcast, the whole Ben, Robin, or trans concept. But before we had that conversation, she was talking about how back in the day when she used to do teaching in college, one time she had a trans person come in to talk to the class, and they were just talking a lot about like their experiences, trans experiences and everything, like we do on this show. And she was saying like that was such an important moment for both me and everybody in the class. And everybody was talking about how much they learned from that. And she's like, I still think about that and have gotten so much just from like that one class. And she's like, have you ever thought about doing something like that? And I was like, well, funny you should say that. I'm literally about to do that in podcast form. It was like very affirming that the thing that we really wanted to do is something that there's a need for, that people are getting something from.
Yeah, I've had to do a lot of educating to help, like, well, specifically the university that I work for. I ended up doing like a presentation for diversity, equity, and inclusion about the hiring process and how it is very not inclusive. And then they had like all these signs on the doors about how they're like the most diverse school in Virginia and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, if you're the most diverse school in Virginia, then why does your hiring process say gender male, female?
Jeez. So inclusive.
But I don't think, again, like, if you're listening and you're not trans, don't think that every trans person you know is willing to be used as an example. But for me personally, I feel good when, for example, Kate that I mentioned, she teaches biology and a lot of her students are pre-nursing. And she will use like some of my medical horror stories to talk about how to provide more inclusive healthcare. I think that's great when people use me as an example. I'm happy with it. And I want to help people understand. I'm willing to bridge that gap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like we've said before, a lot of the more like technical, factual aspects of, trans people is stuff that you can look up online. Like you can find the resources for that. And what is harder to find is just an understanding of what the trans experience is like and just like who we are as people and everything.
Yeah, like you could know XYZ affects trans people, but like there's nothing to connect to, and there's no way to know how it affects trans people just from looking at statistics and like what that might feel like. And it doesn't always feel the same for everyone, but just a couple of examples of how directly and like explicitly that has affected trans people. Like, what is it going to mean to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Kitty.
Hot kitty.
He's just an orange idiot.
Just a silly little orange guy. These guys are like peak orange cat, too.
They're so good. And you've got an orange girl, which is just phenomenal.
Orange. Yes, the orange twins. So, Ben,
Robin,
let's talk about your therapy journey. I hear that you have had several therapists in the past.
Yeah. So when I hit puberty, I felt very wrong in my body. Did not know why.
Yeah.
And as usual, like, as we've stated in earlier episodes we've recorded, like trigger warning for every episode.
Yeah.
Take care of yourself. If you can't listen, like, don't listen.
Mm-hmm.
Take care of yourself first. But I was suicidal when I was like 13. And I tried to take my life. And I was taken to the emergency room. And I was like, I just feel wrong in my body. I don't know why. Like, I feel like an alien in my body. So then I was at a military emergency room, and a psychiatrist spent 15 minutes with me and then just told me I was bipolar and then put me on lithium, which made me manic. And also, because lithium can affect your thyroid, they checked my thyroid and figured out I had a thyroid problem. So I thought that's why I felt like an alien in my body. But like in hindsight, it was gender dysphoria. Like puberty is giving me secondary sex characteristics. I'm not comfortable with them. And so that was my first therapist, was that psychiatrist. And then I went into like a day program. Like I had to be removed from school and go to a military hospital from 9 to 5 every day for therapy, and then graduated from that. And then I had a different therapist, and then I had a different therapist and a different therapist. And we eventually figured out I wasn't bipolar because like I needed meds to deal with the mania the meds were causing, and then I needed meds to deal with the side effects those meds were causing. And like, if the meds don't work, that's not what you have. So they figured out I didn't have that, but like no one ever picked up that it was gender dysphoria, which I feel like it would have been helpful.
A little bit helpful, yeah.
Like if someone's saying I feel wrong in my body, and like I was having a lot of sex, which isn't necessarily a trans thing, but I'm not the only person out there who was trying to find acceptance of my body through someone else. So that was my early therapy journey, was a lot of misdiagnosing and trying to find out why I felt wrong in my body, but no one actually helping.
Mm-hmm.
So that was since I was 14. Then I came out, got an in-person therapist who was really great, but she, rightfully so, I think it was great, only accepted like the low income insurance. And eventually I got different insurance and I couldn't see her anymore because I couldn't afford out of pocket. Loved her though. And she was great. And then after that, I've exclusively done like the online, switch a therapist whenever you want and blah, blah, blah. And I've had some bad experiences with that where it was never a queer therapist. I never really felt validated. I never felt affirmed. And I knew everything that they were telling me. I just didn't know how to feel what they were telling me. And none of them ever helped. And I mean, that's just the general overview. I don't want to take up a whole first half. I don't know if you want to.
Take up as much time as you want.
Well, the first therapist I had to fire was through one of those online ones. And I told her I didn't want to talk religious stuff. And she kept trying to say stuff about God, which was already kind of weird to me. It didn't feel good. But then Roe v. Wade was overturned. And I was talking about anxiety over that and how, not that I have sex with my husband very often, but what if I did and got pregnant and couldn't access an abortion because I know for sure I don't want to carry a baby. And she just was like, well, if you're not a woman, then it doesn't apply to you.
Damn.
And I was like, just because I'm not a woman doesn't mean I can't get pregnant. It still applies to me. And I don't want to be treated like I'm a woman, but I don't want to live in a fantasy where I don't have these, I have these body parts. My husband has those body parts. And in the off chance that something were to happen, I'm worried. And I'm worried for other people who have even less privilege than I do. Because at least at the time I was in California. But what about people in places where they need to travel out of state and they need to be able to get funding to travel out of state and stuff like that. And I was just generally worried. And she was just trying to tell me, if you're a man, you shouldn't have to worry. And it's if you're a person, you should worry about people accessing life-saving healthcare. What about ectopic pregnancies?
It's weird also that she didn't have empathy about that. That's kind of her job, isn't it?
Yeah. So I ended up ending the session right then and there and then leaving a very bad review. But it was just I don't know. Isn't the whole point of a therapist to empathize and not make you feel judged? I don't know. In hindsight, it sounds like it's not as big of a deal as it was, kind of. But at the time, it felt like such a big deal. But yeah, it's just been a lot of people saying, it seems like if it weren't for society, you'd be doing great. And it's yeah, but I'm not doing great. So how do I get my heart to believe what my head knows about everything? And none of the therapists were queer, so it just wasn't very validating and it wasn't very helpful.
There's also there's a lot of different styles and methods of therapy, and a lot of them just work better for some people than other people, and it's okay to switch therapists based on that particular style isn't meeting the needs that you have or just the way that your mind works.
Yeah, but I've kind of given up at this point until I can find someone who's trans, or at least someone who has pretty good experience with trans people.
Yeah, which is something that I have just gotten because, so first of all, I should have had therapy basically forever, I didn't. And then I don't think I ended up starting therapy until I was either late 20s or maybe 30 or something. I was fairly far into life when I actually started it, because I honestly wanted to go to therapy for years and years, but it's it's so hard to access. I didn't have health insurance for a long time. And then even when you do, finding somebody who takes insurance and everything about that is very complicated.
And waitlist.
Yeah. There's so many issues with that. But eventually I did find a therapist, and I was with her for, I think 10 years, something like that. It was kind of a long, interesting journey because when I started off, I had never learned how to talk about my feelings at all. That's not how I was raised. And combined with trauma and so many other things, I just was not in a place to access that. And I'd say the first couple of years, at least, of therapy were just me learning how to talk about my feelings to begin with. When I first started, I was kind of just I don't know, I just feel bad and gross all the time. And I don't know why, diagnose me or something like that. I basically had two emotional settings, which was feeling not horrible or feeling just really bad.
Yeah.
And that was all like I was able to discern. And then, like, as I work with my therapist over time, I was able to kind of understand my emotions a lot better. And have you heard of the emotion wheel?
It sounds familiar. And I've
So,
watched a lot of YouTube on therapy stuff, but I don't know off the top of my head.
so somebody actually came up with a tool. I think it's called the emotion wheel, but it's really for people with an experience like mine, where they like start off not being able to discern their emotions at all. And basically, it breaks it down into in the middle of the wheel. It's very simple, like I feel good, I feel bad.
Hmm.
And then, like, it breaks it down into smaller pieces. So it's like, are you happy? Are you sad? Are you lonely or something? And then it keeps like breaking those parts into like different specific emotions.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a tool to help you if you have trouble understanding your own emotions to kind of discern that what you're feeling. But that was the first several years of my therapy journey.
That's really cool, actually. I feel like that would be really helpful for a lot of different groups of people.
Yeah, for sure. Queer people, people with trauma, neurodivergent people,
Yeah.
people who are all of those things.
Yes, I was specifically thinking about my autistic adopted brothers.
Mhm.
I think that would be really interesting to like try to work with them and see if they could help me understand their feelings. Because communication can be hard sometimes. I love them so much. My adult sons.
Yeah. So cute. So we worked on that for like a while. Most of therapy was just kind of like chatting about things, but that was important at the beginning because I just hadn't had any experience just like talking about stuff, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. And I've come a long way. Now I'm doing this publicly. I'm just doing like a podcast. But so we worked through that. And so one thing I really liked about her was from like the very beginning, she's like, I don't really believe in diagnosing people unless you need it for like a government document or for healthcare reasons or something like that. But she was like, there's so many reasons why people can have some of the same issues. There can be like 20 different diagnoses for why different people have the same thing that they're struggling with. Or in yourself, you could have a bunch of different comorbid things happening. It's just not always helpful to jump into a diagnosis. And so we'll just talk about the feelings and experiences instead of just saying, like, you have such and such and working from that. This is a really valuable thing for me to hear from the beginning. And it ended up paying off much further down the road because I don't know if she saw me and right away spotted trauma. I think as a professional therapist, almost definitely, because like I can do that. I'm not a therapist. I can like see people's trauma from a mile away.
Yeah, it's like how they hold themselves and how they react.
But it was like a really long time into therapy until we got to this point. And she was never like, hey, you have PTSD or whatever. But we kind of like slowly worked towards it until eventually she's like, hey, there's this book called The Body Keeps the Score. You should consider reading that or whatever. And so I ended up reading the book and it was kind of revelatory. But there is one section where the author was talking about different both physical and emotional symptoms of people who have trauma. And as I went down the list, first of all, I had literally everything on the list, like long list, every single symptom. And then also, I compared back to the notes I came in with when I first started therapy. Like, these are all the things I struggle with. And it was all things on the list. Like, it all kind of came together. And so once I realized that, we were really able to start making some progress working on like the childhood trauma and a lot of stuff.
And was this all before you came out?
This was before I came out. And I guess she was like the second person I came out to. Like Erin was the first person, at least as an adult, that I talked to about it. And then like right afterwards, I had therapy a couple days later. And so I was
Good.
like, yeah. And it was like hard bringing up even with a therapist at that point. But I was just kind of like, here's the thing that happened, just to get into that. And I think when it came to the trans part of my journey, she was very supportive and accepting, but not necessarily. I don't think she had had many trans clients before me, if any at all. So there came a point eventually where I realized that every session, like, I was teaching her stuff about being trans just to be able to talk about the stuff that I was working through. And so it was not the most helpful dynamic, I guess, once we got a little bit farther into that part of therapy.
Sounds like she was really good for your earlier stuff, though.
Yeah, she was really good for that. Like, I will say, one way that she was helpful with the trans aspect of my journey early on is just that, like, we were able to have like a lot of girl talk because she always got her nails done and stuff like that. And we would like talk about nails and shoes and stuff like that all the time. So that was actually really affirming because I was never really able to do just basic girl talk and stuff like that. So that was kind of healing, just being able to have that kind of like chat. But I had been feeling for a long time that maybe I should find somebody who had more experience when it came to trans issues, maybe somebody who is queer too, so that they would have at least some like overlapping, kind of just like knowing where we're coming from in general. And I never really made the decision to like switch therapists until like pretty recently. My therapist that I've been seeing for like 10 years stopped taking insurance. And because of that, like it would have been complicated for me to keep going to her. So I just saw it as an opportunity to find somebody who might specialize more in my needs and everything. And so I was searching around online for, first of all, I was like looking for a queer woman in general, and then also for somebody who had experience with trans people and with trauma. Those were the most important things for me in finding a therapist. So I was searching for that. It was complicated, both finding somebody who like checked all those boxes and also accepted insurance.
Yeah.
So like I wasn't able to find somebody locally. I did find somebody in state, just from the opposite side of the state. So we're doing like telehealth, but it's like that is actually kind of cool that she's like from the opposite side of the state though, because she lives and practices in an area where like I asked her once in one of her first sessions, I was like, so have you had many other trans clients? And she's like, oh, yeah. She's like, the area that I live at, like, our practice is like the only one in the county or something that's queer affirming at all. So I literally just have all of the trans people anywhere nearby.
Yeah, because if you're not in specifically the part of the state we're in now or within an hour from it, chances are there's going to be very limited resources.
Yeah. So I've only been seeing her for a month or two now, but it was immediately from the beginning just really amazing because in a lot of ways I felt seen for the first time, and it just feels like she's very present. She's really, like I was saying before, there's like a lot of different methodologies and stuff like that. And I just feel like the way that she works, she's been really attentive to like how I'm engaging with what we're talking about. And she can tell like when I'm processing something or whatever, and she'll just stop and be like, what are you feeling right now? Like what's going on in your mind or whatever.
It's nice.
Yeah. And I also told her up front, like, if you see me start to space out, or if you see me start to like tell a lot of jokes or something like that, that's just my defense mechanisms trying to make me not talk about what we're talking about. So just when that happens, press harder and make me talk about it. She's like, okay, cool.
That was probably really nice. Like that speaks a lot to how much work you have done for you to be able to recognize that and be ready to have someone push those buttons.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And also, I feel like I'm in the most stable place I've been in for a while, like in that I feel pretty safe right now to like really dig into some of the harder things to talk about and everything. And I feel like I'm okay being a little bit more triggered and everything, like when we talk about things. And like the way the scheduling works, I happen to normally have the day off work the day after we have our therapy sessions, which is good because most of the sessions like really fuck me up for a day or two. I just like really feel it for a while. So it's good to have some recovery time.
That's amazing. I used to do therapy on Thursdays because I could remember therapy Thursday because I've got executive dysfunction. So I was like, oh,
Yeah, me too. A
therapy
little
Thursday.
bit.
That was really nice. I wish I had more of an experience with a therapist who was like that. Sounds like you've only had 2 therapists, but you've picked 2 pretty good ones.
hmm
That's really cool.
Yeah, I kind of got lucky in a lot of ways, especially with the first one because I didn't really know what I was looking for. And I literally just like went with the first person I found who would take insurance, which was really hard.
Yeah, because there's so many different insurances, and there's even like sub levels of insurance within an insurance. And they might take one and not the other, even though they're under the same umbrella. It's such a nightmare to access.
And there wasn't really anything going on with telehealth back then either. So finding somebody locally was required. There wasn't an option to, I was able to cast a much larger net and find somebody who more specifically fit my needs the second time around because I had more people to choose from. And it was like still hard to find somebody, but it was easier than it was before. But I always tell people who aren't necessarily getting a lot out of therapy or just don't have the best relationship with their therapist, but feel kind of bad about it or whatever. It's always completely fine to just switch therapists as many times as you need to until you find somebody who you work well with together. Not even just when it comes to what they specialize in and stuff like that, but even just the personal connection. It's so important to find somebody that you're comfortable with because that's where all the good progress comes from is when you're able to like really connect with that person and feel safe.
Let your guard down. Yeah, I've had 2 that I really connected with, but one of them, like, I kind of had tried all the tools in her toolbox, and she couldn't really help me anymore. The other one had Wi-Fi issues, and I would spend our entire 45 minutes just trying to get 5 minutes of actually being able to talk. And it's like, I like you a lot as a person, but this is making my anxiety worse.
Yeah.
Facebook keeps trying to get me to add him as a friend.
Oh,
He's
that's weird.
an old Southern grandpa who's a drummer who has trans friends and has other trans clients, but his Wi-Fi issues sucked. Plus, I had booked him initially as like a typing only session, and he like from the jump tried to do a video only session, and I really wanted to start with typing sessions so they wouldn't see my face and hear my voice and misgender me because I had never met this guy before. But like he jumped right into the video session, and that kind of annoyed me because it's like I booked it under a specific thing for a reason. But that's what you get with those therapy farm services, I guess. Great guy, though.
Yeah.
Real sassy. Just a sassy old man. He was fun.
One thing that I did when I was first like filling out the intake forms and everything for my new therapist is in the little section where this is like a PDF or something where you can fill in the document like digitally. In the section where it's like, what's your history or something like that. I just took full advantage of that and just wrote like an entire page, just like as much stuff that I could cover essentially. So she would have a good idea of all that stuff, like where I was coming from before we met the first time. Like the first time she met, she was also like, thank you for doing that. That was really helpful.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But if you have an option to do that, that can be helpful, even just to make sure that you're not getting misgendered and stuff.
Yeah, I did. I make it very clear. Like I've always been very clear where like I don't mind if my friends tell their friends if I'm trans, like because my situation is where it is and that's fine. And I've always been upfront with therapist intake. And almost every time I've tried a new therapist, it's been like, so you've got a lot to deal with. What are we going to start with? And I'll even put like originally diagnosed as bipolar and like nothing against being bipolar. I just am not. And they put me on the meds and it did not work for me. But, you know, like here's the diagnoses I've had. Here's the diagnoses that have been removed, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes it seems like they don't even read it. Which is, it's fair. Like it's a fair strategy to have your patient like go over it verbally just so you have it like a vibe of how they feel about it. But it can be pretty obvious if you haven't even read it. And it's like, why'd you have me type this up?
Yeah, seriously.
And it just gets me started off not really trusting them with the ability to actually care for me, which isn't necessarily the therapist's fault, depending on like what you're going, like how you're accessing the therapy. They may not have the time. They may not get paid enough, which was one thing I brought up with some of the online services I've tried. It's like you have no queer therapists. So either you're not making it a welcoming environment for queer therapists or you're not offering enough pay to get quality people.
Oh, they're not.
Yeah.
They're really not. It's terrible.
I got a refund for one service I tried when
Okay.
I made a big stink. When I get real upset, I go hard sometimes. Sometimes I decide it's not worth the time, but sometimes I go a little extra. And that's, you know, something I could work on, I guess. But sometimes it gets you a refund, and that's nice. I just hope they still paid the therapists I saw. Because, well, in one case, they weren't very good. But they still put the time in.
Yeah, I follow a lot of therapists on TikTok and other social media. And so I've heard all their rants from the therapist perspective about some of the online services. And so first of all, they do not pay well at all. Like they really barely pay them. So, I mean, one thing you have to think about is that's really limiting the amount of people who are going to be working for those services. It's going to be, I don't know, like it's specifically going to be people who have trouble finding clients. Maybe they're like brand new or maybe they're just not great. But like if they're doing those services, it's because like they're not getting clients otherwise most of the time, or maybe they're doing it because they want to be able to just like help people. But there's that up front just because they're not paying them basically. And then also like BetterHelp is so shady.
Yeah.
Like
they don't necessarily require you to actually be a therapist. They just claim they do.
Also, they harvest your data.
Yeah, that was why I stopped with them specifically. I've tried 4 different online. Turns out, though, like I tried Pride Counseling, and then the therapist I saw through it kept calling it BetterHelp, and then I was just really pissed that I got tricked into using BetterHelp.
Yeah.
And like they were charging me more for Pride Counseling, and then my therapist wasn't even queer. They had no trans therapists through Pride Counseling. And they were charging me more. And like with BetterHelp, you can say like, this is my financial situation and I need a lower rate. And they do it no problem. But for Pride Counseling, they make you like write an essay to justify it. And it's like Pride Counseling should be more inclusive and easier. Like, why are you making the definitely marginalized people put in more work to get a better rate?
Oh, yeah, I know. Seriously. I feel like a lot of times all the boundaries and things that make it difficult to get access to mental health care, they disproportionately affect the people who need it the most.
Yeah.
Both for like financial reasons, and then also just with how difficult it can be to find a therapist and get all of that stuff worked out. You're doing it from a place of being somebody who needs therapy badly. So like maybe you're just like incredibly depressed or, you know, whatever else. And it's just really difficult to do that stuff. And like, I think part of that is why it took me so long to get into therapy. Even once I was able to like pay for it and everything, is it's like kind of daunting to do all that stuff. And all the executive functioning involved in it.
Yeah.
Takes a lot of work and effort to find that. And if you're somebody who's in a bad place.
Like if you're in crisis mode.
Yeah.
Like it's hard enough to keep existing day to day, let alone write an essay about why you're financially unstable.
Mm-hmm.
And then like with some medications, like for example, ADHD meds, like you have to manually like go out of your way to refill them every month, but they treat executive dysfunction. So
Oh my God.
you're having people with executive dysfunction with a medication shortage trying to access the medication they need to function, but then they're having to call 15 different pharmacists to even find it in stock. And it's just an endless loop of people being unable to function on a basic level. So I've given up on ADHD meds too.
I've had so many issues with that because there's like, in theory, there's good reasons for that because they're trying to keep people from abusing it or something. But it just makes it so much harder for the people who need it to access. And I don't know, it's just been like a huge pain. And there was definitely a phase where they were always out of stock too.
Mm-hmm.
And then my pharmacist was like, well, maybe you can get it from this other pharmacy. And so I tried to do that. And then they were like, we can't do that because you already have a pharmacist. And the different like requirements that you need to be able to be prescribed it are changing all the time.
And it costs money.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you have a copay anyway, depending on your insurance, like you have to spend money in order to be able to do what it takes to earn money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ironically, yeah. And like my psychiatrist, all the psychiatrists that I've seen recently, at least, have been telehealth. But there's like a requirement now. I think it's like a federal drug enforcement policy or something like that, whatever it is. Like there's a requirement that you have to have an in-person visit with your psychiatrist once per year. And so there's this weird thing where like I'm seeing my psychiatrists online 99% of the time. But then there's like one random session per year where she's like, you got to come in so we can talk just so I can check this box. I'm like, okay, cool.
Another thing with that is like if you're drug tested for your job, not that it's applicable to me, but like for my husband who's military and probably ADHD, he can't treat it or he gets discharged because it comes up as it's a controlled substance.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're like in the military or in any job that requires drug testing to a certain degree, sometimes you can't even get a medical waiver to get treatment. So if he were to get diagnosed and start treatment for his executive dysfunction, he can choose between treatment or for us to have a place to live.
Yeah.
And like, it's just, I know this one isn't necessarily about medication, but it goes hand in hand with therapy. Because my first therapist was a psychiatrist who just also did therapy. So sometimes you can see them. And the only reason why I got to see him in the first place is because I tried to take my own life. Otherwise, the waiting list was almost a year.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because, and I totally get it, but if you're a military dependent, you're way lower on the priority list than if you're active duty or someone who has served, which is completely fair. But also, everyone in a crisis deserves access to care, you know?
Especially if you're in a crisis, yeah.
And if you're a child, I don't know. But yeah, the only reason why I got access to it at all is because I was in that much of a crisis.
The whole system is just terrible.
It's very bad. And they can't get more therapists because they're not paying them enough.
Yeah. And I could get on this soapbox like all day, but so I personally think that mental health care should be considered preventative care,
Mm-hmm.
which would be covered under the ACA. Just like so many things that are medical risks for us too.
Like you shouldn't have to be drowning to learn how to swim.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's bad. I have a burp, but it's like in my chest.
You have what?
I have like a chest burp, and it's not going anywhere.
No. You're a Cassie trans baby.
I am.
It's good to have the updates too.
Mm-hmm.
How is my friend's gastrointestinal health going sometimes?
Bad.
It's important. It's very important.
They've tried to see if I have gastroparesis and stuff, but all the tests came back normal. But the story of my life is they'll do like the bare minimum test, say it doesn't look like anything's wrong, and then they just won't look any deeper.
Mm.
And even if I'm saying like this affects me every single day, they're like, well, the numbers look fine, so you're fine. And it's like, I don't feel fine. And they're like, well, we don't care.
Healthcare. I went to the emergency room once for, well, now I know it was for an anxiety attack, but I went to the ER and got all kinds of brain scans and stuff. And then went to a neurologist and got, we call it, like the electrodes on my head and stuff.
Yeah. EKG or ECG. One of them's for heart, one of them's for head. I don't know if they're both
EKG
the same.
EKG is your heart. I did get one of those too.
Yeah.
At the hospital, but
if you're having an anxiety attack, it probably looked real interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was crazy because I had never experienced this particular symptom before, but like I was in bed at night and all of a sudden I couldn't feel like the left side of my body.
Oh yeah, that's scary.
It's like just like a strip on the outside of my skin, like basically head to toe. And so obviously that freaked me out and I went to the hospital immediately. But anyway, I went through all these tests and they were like, I think you just had an anxiety attack.
That happened to my mom, except it was actually a heart problem. And they sent her home and told her to keep working out and lifting weights. And then she went to a different emergency room and had stents the next day. Healthcare's fucked. Mental health care is fucked. People don't know what symptoms go with what. And there's so much overlap with symptoms. And it's so hard to find the right treatments when everything is so connected. Like the arm bone is connected to the collarbone. Like the hip bone is connected to the leg bone. Everything affects everything. And even just a good therapist could fix a lot of those symptoms, but it's just so hard to even get in. It's hard to find the right one. If you want to switch, how long is it going to take to get the next one?
Yeah, I mean, that's partly why I was saying it should be considered preventative care too, because there's so many physical symptoms, like even just back and neck pain, that it's like, so like if you have PTSD, it's like almost a universal symptom that like you're going to have back and neck pain.
Yeah,
And
or digestive or...
Digestive, yeah.
Yeah.
Heart issues. There's like so much stuff that can be treated or kind of nipped at the bud before it becomes an issue by having access to mental health care and everything.
Yeah.
So that's important.
It's so important. I feel like everyone should have the option. Doesn't mean they have to do it. I think a lot of people should. I think I should. It's just, there's so much with my health that I'm not doing that I should be doing. But at the same time, I do also feel like mentally I am in a better place than I've been in a long time, even without it. It's just how much better would I feel with it? But it's just so hard to find someone who's queer, someone you feel safe with, someone who accepts your insurance or you can afford, who doesn't have a wait list that makes it feel like an insurmountable feat. And friends are great, but it's not their job to do your therapy for you. Unless you have a podcast. And then it's still not your job, but you're signing up for it.
Yeah. We're here anyway.
Yeah.
We're giving each other the unlicensed therapy. It has been really good though. Like podcasting is group therapy, not just what we're recording too, but I think like some of our best talks are like what we do in between episodes.
Yeah.
Honestly, a lot of these episodes are just us transcribing notes from our text message history because we can text each other about some random thing that happens and then it just turns into a podcast.
Yeah, half the stuff we talk about is stuff we've already talked about over text and we're just saying it out loud for the first time.
Yeah, exactly.
But I am also looking forward to hopefully building a community and like hearing from other people what hit home, like what felt validating, what else they would add. Like, I want to get more people on here. I just want to hear from people, talk to people. I'm going to say that all the time. But it's just so hard to find community sometimes. And it's not therapy, but it's definitely, it's a treatment of sorts, is to find people that you connect with and can validate each other.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my biggest motivations in like getting into podcasting and everything was just that I want to be able to provide free resources that aren't paywalled, that there aren't like boundaries in the way of people getting access to. That like back in the day when I was first listening to like a lot of trans and queer podcasts, a lot of people have really good Discord servers and different kinds of community and stuff. But it's always if you're a Patreon subscriber or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like I right up front when I provide a Discord community, which we have, and we want it to get bigger for sure. But like I want to provide those opportunities for people just for free. Like literally, we put a link to the Discord in the episode notes every week. So you can just go down there and click and jump right in. Super easy. Please do it because we can talk to each other that way and build some community, have some of these conversations. And then also, like Ben was saying, just give us that feedback. We really want to know what you guys are getting from this, what's connecting, maybe what's not connecting, maybe some areas that we're missing. That's important to know, stuff like that. And we are really here to just provide resources and really get trans voices out there. Also, if you or somebody you know who would be a valuable voice to have on here would be interested in being on, please contact us.
Yeah, we want to get as many different angles, as many different experiences. We can talk about the same topics more than once because no transition is the same, no trans person is the same. There's so many experiences. And like as far as resources go in the Discord server, like the more people we get that join, the more resources we'll be able to find. Because if we have people from all sorts of different places with all sorts of different areas of expertise, they'll know resources that other people don't know about. And we can just work together and build a little community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Try to collect people.
Yes, we're people collectors. Join us.
Join our club. It's a club for only cool cutie pies. And if you're listening to this, you're probably a cool cutie pie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Therapy.
All right. Well, I have been your very unlicensed therapist, Robin.
I have been your so unlicensed therapist, Ben.
This is Ben and Robin are trans, and we will see you all next time.
Bye. We're so good at this.
We are amazing podcasters.
Everybody listen. Because we're right. And other people are probably right too. Some people are wrong. Hey, audience, you should probably edit this out, but I pooped today.
I'm so proud of you.
I'm proud of me too.